Hi folks, so today I'm going to be working on a small drawstring pouch being built to replace my current charm bag or medicine bag. This little pouch is a few years old now, and it's got a lot of miles on it. The one I'm going to be working on putting together today is going to be made a little bit differently. Instead of sewing with buckskin cord, I'm actually going to be sewing it with bone needles and sinew. Sinew is the dried out tendons, in this case of white-tailed deer. Now it starts like this once it's removed from the animal and dried. Now I've taken this piece and spent several minutes pounding it between a log and a round stone to break up those fibers, and once it's to this point I can peel out strips of it like so and carefully break down these fibers, these strips of sinew, into much smaller, finer pieces, and when they're processed they end up looking like this. Now if I take those pieces and chew on them just a little bit and soften them up, I can twine them onto my sewing needle like so, and we'll go ahead and show you how to do that here. Now I like to start directly on the needle like this and then twine the string out from it, because I can basically make a needle custom loaded for my project, and I can add to that and add to that and make string as long as I want it to. Now I'll take this, get it a little damp, and just chew on it a little bit. It doesn't actually take much because we're just working with fine fibers here. I'm sparing you having to watch me chew on tendon. We're going to take and put the end of that fiber through the toughest part of any hand sewing project, threading the needle. Alright, we thread it through like that, making it look as easy as we possibly can. Now once I've got it threaded through like this, the sinew is very strong, so it'll hold up to the sewing. I want to take the top and twist it away and then roll it toward, and then repeat that, twist it away and roll it toward. What I'm doing is putting that fiber under tension, so when it wants to unwind or unravel itself, it sort of unwinds back into the twist and gives us this nice thread. Now that's actually because the sinews are very, very strong. It's actually quite a strong thread. I'm holding it, I'm pinching it with this hand here, this fingers, to keep it from unraveling, to keep it together. And twist with the top, grab those two and roll it back. And I'm always twisting away and rolling toward, so I can use that tension to my benefit. And once I get to this point here, I'll chew on my next piece of fiber, and we want to take and lay that over this one like so, and give it a good couple of twists to keep them together, and then roll it. Twist and roll, just like so. And that's how we're going to add more fiber, more material to add length. Now you can see how these are a little bit thinner than I want here. What I can actually do is take a little bit of fiber like this. It's a little lighter, thinner stuff. I peel a piece off of this here, And I'll give this a little little chew, a little extra help, a little extra moisture like that, and I can actually splice this in a little bit differently than I did that first one here. So I lay it over the top like that, give it our backwards twist, and then roll it forward. And now this side, I'll take that tail that I had hung over and kind of incorporate it into that top. And this all takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of repetition, but it's very simple in principle. And with a little bit of time, you can get fairly quick and find yourself with a functional needle and thread real quickly. Now the reason I'm making the thread off of the end of the needle like this instead of making the thread and putting it through the eye of the needle, by doing it this way I can have a much smaller eye, which makes it stronger in the bone, which is fairly brittle, and there's really not a lump here. So when I go and I start sewing and I pull this through the leather, it's going to be less likely to catch up than if I have a full string that's bent through the needle and creates a sort of a knuckle here, a lump here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few feet of string, because for a little pouch this size, about 20-25 inches of string will be, our thread will be plenty, and then we'll take a look at the next step. Now we've got a couple of needles preloaded with sinew thread, just in case one of the needles breaks, because sometimes the bone needles do break. That's why we always have spares made up and ready to go. So the next step is going to be cutting out our pouch, our leather. Now I like to do these with a single seam, so it's actually folded along the one side and the seam runs along the bottom and up the other side, and then of course the top is just drawstring. So if I was outside, I'd be next to the campfire, I'd be using a little twig with a burned end for this, but we're going to use the pencil here today. I'm just going to mark where I want this sort of top edge to be, and I'm going to mark right about where I want the bottom edge to be. I like to leave a little bit of room for mistakes, a little bit of extra space here. Typically I'm going about a hand width, and you can see we're right about a hand width here. And to cut this, my tool of preference here when we're doing stone tools like this is what's called a laminar blade. It's struck off of a stone core, piece of kind of like this. It just breaks off lengthwise from the edge. You break them off layer after layer, you get these nice thin, very very sharp flakes. This one's actually sharp on both sides, so I have to be a little careful working with it, but we're just gonna give it a careful slice like so, and you can see we're plenty sharp enough to do the job here. So we'll cut the top and the bottom. And sometimes just gotta go back and trim a little bit here. The leather that I'm using is brain tanned buckskin, traditionally tanned. This is off of the upper leg of front leg of a white-tailed deer. So it's pretty tough stuff. This was a good sized buck. And we've got more material here for later. Just set that aside. Now, since I'm going to be folding this in half to stitch it up, I want to make sure everything lines up like so. And we'll go ahead and use our fancy modern charcoal here to just trim the edge so that we're nice and even. Yeah. I'm being a little careful here because I don't want to cut into my desktop too much more than I already have. If I was using a piece of wood, I'd be pressing, like a plank of wood, I'd be pressing pretty hard and would cut through that in one pass. It's certainly sharp enough to be capable of that. The chert blades like this, when this is worn out for this process, I'll actually take it and chip it into an arrowhead, about like so. It'll be real nice for that. And so now we'll probably go ahead and round these corners out and give it a little adjustment, and we'll be ready to start sewing. Alright, now we've got our shape cut out here. As you can see, it ends up looking very much like a side seam moccasin pattern. If this were the size of my foot, we'd put a cut right about here in the shape of a T, sew this up across the outside edge, and then sew it up the back, and it'd be a wearable shoe. But a little small, for me anyway. At this point, what we're going to do is actually flip this inside out and start the sewing process. So we're done with our handy stone blade here, and we're going to be using bone awls. Now this is just a couple different versions. For a smaller project like this, I'll be using this one because it's very precise, and if the holes are giving me a little trouble, this one here, which is a bone shard actually mounted into a piece of antler, has a lot of grip, so I can really put a lot of pressure behind that, and it's really good for widening up and opening up holes. Of course, if you want to be a little less fancy but get the same effect, you can use kind of the whole leg bone like this one. Now, the leather pad here, because the awl will absolutely poke holes in my desk, as well as the leather and anything else that's underneath it. So if you start doing something like this on your lap, you absolutely want a piece of wood or something for protection. So I'm going to give that a starter hole, a starter poke, like that. Now you can see I've worked my way through here, and you can see I've got a hole here and here, so I know where I'm starting from. And this leather is very tough, so it's definitely going to take a little extra push, and that's actually why I am using the awls. And occasionally, you can see our bone is kind of brittle, and we'll have to sharpen these up just a little bit. And I'm using this because it's at hand, but any abrasive stone will do the trick as long as it's fine enough to give you a fine finished point. Now we've got a starter hole, so we're going to put the needle through like so. I may actually have to widen that up a bit. And sometimes it takes a little extra like that. Now you can see I put a knot in the end here, and that's just to keep the thread from sort of unwinding, unraveling. And it makes a very convenient stopper. I'm going to tie that in place, and now we're ready to keep sewing along and close up that seam. Now I've got the first couple stitches done, so I'm going to show you how I'm stitching this up. We're taking the awl here, pressing all the way through the leather, so you can see the tip right here, and give it a little bit of a push and a little bit of a twist, and that's going to give us a good sized hole, just about the same size as the needle. And push that through and pull it tight. Now I'm actually going to go back through that same hole and do a loop over the edge. Now this is the bottom of the bag, so I want this extra secure. So what this is just doing is doubling the stitch on each hole, and just helping to make sure that I've got a really strong, really secure stitch. Alright, we're at our last stitch here, so we're gonna work that through. You can see it's, there we go, stitched all the way up. And sometimes the leather compresses a little bit as you're sewing, and it's helpful to go back and pull your stitches tight with an awl or one of your sewing tools. Now we're going to go back through the same hole right here, and you can see we kept it tighter, so it's going to take a little bit of a push. Should do it. There we go. And it's not uncommon to find broken needles in the archaeological record. They do break doing that sometimes, but we got lucky on this one. Now we're gonna pull that tight like so, and you can see I've gone through the loop here and through the next stitch down. I'm gonna pull that good and tight and pull that through, and that'll actually tie that end off fairly smoothly. And I'm just going to kind of go back through a couple of the stitches like so. Now I like to go back and tie a sort of a finishing knot on my twine like this. What we're doing here is just to keep it from unraveling. Now, because that knot is a little bit high up here, we're gonna go through one more stitch just to keep everything nice and flush. There we go. Gonna work it through there like that, and we'll take our helpful sharp rock and just trim that a little bit off there. And you can see we've got, oh, we estimated pretty well here. I would say we've got about 8 inches of thread left. It'll be enough to do a patch on something for sure. So this is our stitched up bag, still inside out. And you can see that's our seam from the outside. And actually fairly smooth. On the bottom you can see it's a little bit tighter because of those extra loops that we put through, but that's exactly what we're looking for. So now that our bag is stitched together, we're ready for the next step here. We're going to be adding the drawstring. Now to do that, I want to make sure this seam is folded as evenly and flat as I can get it here. So we're going to do this drawstring in a little bit of a unique way. It's only going to draw down from one side. So on this side, you need to poke a hole all the way through, just like we did for the stitching, and I'm going to stretch that open a little bit more because I want these to be slightly larger starter holes. And what we're going to do for each one of these is take a slightly modified blade tool here, and we're just going to cut this a little bit bigger than where we're starting, and just a little bit, and just very carefully, both because we don't want any blood loss and because we don't want a very large hole. We just want a little bit larger than what the awl is going to give us. You can widen that up and you can see the difference here between the two, the one that's unmodified and the one that's been slit. Now our reasoning for doing that is that it's going to make the drawstring slide through a lot easier with that little bit of extra space on the leather. Now you want the drawstring to be smooth but tight, so it's kind of a balance. Now we're gonna take our awl here and put a hole right into the end. Now I want to use the smooth awl for this and not a blade, because I want this to be as strong as possible. This is just kind of slide the fibers, move the fibers out of the way, and give us a hole that's going to be very secure and very strong. On the bag, I'm going to take the other end of this where we've got it trimmed to a point and get that just a little bit wet to kind of tie the fibers together and thread it through. There we go. Just like threading it through the needle. It's going to fight a little bit, but that's okay. We want it to be good and strong. I'll pull this all the way through and rotate that so that it's right side out. Now we're going to take that hole that we put into the end here and feed it through. That's basically going to give us a slip knot without a knot, like a lasso or a snare, but without a big lumpy knot there. It's just going to kind of splice the cord to the end, and you can see how tight that is going to be. Once we get this in place, it's not quite going to be locked there permanently, but it's going to be pretty hard to get undone, and that's exactly what we want. There we go. Now I've done that step on the folded side of the bag instead of the seam side, because the drawstring part is going to feed around from the other side here, and that'll pull everything tight, and that'll put very little stress on this seam, which will just help with the longevity of the bag. Now for our next step here, I've got a bone needle, just like the ones we used for the sinew. but scaled up. Now the reason I've got this scaled up version is because I'm essentially using larger thread. Now I can take the leather here that I'm going to be using for the next strand, and I can feed it through one hole at a time by hand without any real trouble, but it takes a little bit of time. If I take this bone needle and do the same, then just like sewing the bag with the sinew, it goes a little bit quicker and a little bit easier, and it just saves me some time. I've got the drawstring strung all the way through, and I've matched the length more or less to the original, or to the predecessor anyway. And what I'm going to do to finish this off, make it wearable, is pull the drawstring open like so, and I'm going to bring this over here and do a bowline. Now the way I'm going to do this is going to be a little bit funny because the necklace is already sort of partially assembled. So you can see I've looped the tail around like so. I'm going to pull on that, and that gives me my loop on the necklace side. I want that about 2 finger widths or so from the bag, a little space. Bring that tail around, back through like so, and I'll pull that good and tight. There we go. Now we have our drawstring bag ready to wear. Now I'm going to leave this tail on here for now because I want the flexibility for future adjustment, and there may need to be some of that. The leather can, the buckskin, the leather can stretch, and of course the bag itself isn't completely finished yet. We have to transfer my little carved pendants here onto the bag, and we'll be doing that next, and then transferring the contents. Once that's done, we'll give it a fitting, make sure that it sits where it's supposed to, and at that point I'll trim off this tail and make sure that the final adjustments are all in place. So for the next step here, I'm going to be transferring the charms. Got my dragonfly here and just laced some leather through it. Now this is a piece unique to me, so yours will probably be a little bit different if you want to make something equivalent. What I like to do is use the buckskin on this one. The holes are basically buttonhole size, and taking a kind of a finer but very tough piece of buckskin cord here, good length, and got it laced through. Now what I'm going to need to do on the bag for this part is find center. So we'll just fold that in half. The holes are going to be right about this level. It's designed to kind of hang off the bottom. So it's going to give me center. I just want to press on it a little bit because I don't want to poke all the way through the bag and put a bunch of holes in it. I just kind of want to mark that spot. And it might be hard to see on the camera, but it's right here. And we're going to just push the awl in like so. And just to give us our sort of estimated distance, our other hole's going to be right about here. And this doesn't have to be perfect. The leather's very very soft and supple, so it can take off a little bit of a bigger bite. A slightly bigger bite is a little better. It just makes it a little bit stronger over time. And so I've got my awl here. I've widened those holes up for the dragonfly, and I'm just gonna ever so carefully pass that through, like so. And now our dragonfly is gonna perch there. What I want to do now is take this extra slack, these tails, and just do an overhand knot. The trick here is that I want that knot to be as tight in as I can get it underneath the dragonfly, which is a little tough maybe to see what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of working the knot through, or working the slack through the knot slowly and carefully to try and get it as tight in there as I can get it. And kind of pull the two tails separate, push the knot up, and just sort of work it up there like so. And you can see it's on there pretty solidly. Tighten that up as much as I can. Now, I don't want the tails quite this long, so usually just right about the length of the dragonfly, a little bit longer, we'll just kind of trim those off like so. And our dragonfly is in place. Next up, we're going to transfer a turtle. Okay, for our turtle, he goes together a little differently than the dragonfly. We've got a little hole that runs through the side of his mouth here, so he's kind of biting on. We're going to take some of our leftover sinew thread from sewing up the bag and work it through like so. Now I want to place him on the bag right about where he's supposed to sit, just a little above the dragonfly, but low enough that he doesn't really interfere with or get caught up in the drawstring. So we're going to go right about here, and just like putting on the dragonfly, we don't want holes all the way through our bag, so we're going to put a little piece of hard leather in there. Our dragonfly gives us our center, so we can just kind of work off of that. And we're going to mark with a little hole to either side, and you can see right about where our turtle's going to sit. Now I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the dragonfly. I'm going to punch that hole and make it a little oversized initially. The leather will kind of shrink back in, but we want to be able to pull our needle through. Alright. Now, because I made this thread up where it was off of the end of the needle, I've got the needle on one side and not the other. So what I'm going to do here is actually pull this first needle through like that, and on our other side I'm going to take a completely different needle here and try to thread this through the needle. There we go. And I'm going to actually pull this one through the opposite direction. There we go. It's a little tougher because I had to fold the string through, or the thread through the eye, which is why I did it this way in the first place. And we're going to pull our little turtle friend up here so he's good and tight. And then we're going to actually just knot this thread on the front, and then kind of hold them up on the back. And on the back side here, we're going to do a couple of knots. Get my fingers coordinated here. There we go. So we're going to start off with a square knot, which is just a really solid, tight knot, especially with the sinew. That'll hold pretty well. And then I'm actually going to do a what's called a lock knot, which is just a half hitch that I'm going to slide down right up next to the square knot on either side. And I'm doing that because the sinew thread can try to unravel and slip a little bit. So I'm going to just give it a little bit of extra secure strength at that knot. Now, same thing on the other side, just a little overhand knot. And slide this all the way down to where the square knot is. Have that good and tight. And that fella should be on there pretty solid. Now I'll just trim off those tails and easier said than done. We don't want any blood loss in this project. There we go. Unnecessary blood loss on projects is always a good thing to avoid. And turtle and dragonfly are on there really solid. Now all that's left is going to be to transfer the contents of the previous bag, which in my case it's something that they're unique to the wearer, the charms inside, but in my case it's little pieces of, well, gravel. Each little pebble in this bag comes from a place where I've camped or spent time with friends, family, etc. And each one carries an important memory or a little piece of home. So everywhere I go, I have with me a little piece of good memories, good times, happiness, whatever I need it to be. Yours will be unique to you. That's sort of the joyful thing about this kind of a project. However you make yours, however you build it, whatever you put in it, will be completely unique to you. And now to finish it off, I'm going to try it on. And as you can see, it's a little bit tight, but that's done on purpose. The reason that I want that to be a little bit tight to sit a little high is the first time I wear this and I go out and exercise or get rained on or snowed on or something and end up with water on that leather, it's going to stretch a little bit and it's going to sit right about here, which is pretty much where I want it to be. So what I'll go ahead and do is take my helpful little stone flake here, and again, without any blood loss whatsoever, just trim off that extra tail, and there's enough there to use for future projects. And with that, we've got a complete, filled with good luck, good medicine, good charm, good spirit, good memories medicine bag. I hope you've enjoyed and been able to see everything and follow along well enough to build your own. Wish you the best of luck. I wear mine every day, everywhere I go, and I like to think that it carries a little bit of home and a little bit of good luck with me. Thanks for watching.